Welcome to the Tech Today podcast. It's your host, John Maeda. So a little bit more on NVIDIA. I was just playing with consensus numbers. And the consensus for fiscal year 2025 is 120 billion. We are currently in the fiscal second quarter, which will be reported in August. And for Q2, the company guided to 8% sequential revenue growth, plus or minus 2%, I believe it was. So I just went to the midpoint. But to get to consensus, which is 120 billion for the year, it implies somewhat of a back-end loaded year. And what would give you that bit of a hockey stick for the rev growth is Blackwell, which is yet to be shipped, to my knowledge. I don't know that anybody has Blackwell. And Blackwell could be shipped in Q4. Facebook / Meta, one of NVIDIA's largest customers, doesn't expect to get Blackwell until calendar 2025. So there's some risk to that 120 billion consensus revenue estimate. So if you look at the three scenarios that I published here, scenario one assumes Blackwell ships in Q4, and that's why you get the revenue growth acceleration. So we go from 8% sequential revenue growth in Q3 to 15% revenue growth in Q4. And again, that's a sequential revenue growth, not year over year. So that's scenario one. Scenario two assumes that Blackwell doesn't ship until Q1 of calendar 2025. So you get sort of high single-digit sequential revenue growth in scenario number two. And that gets you to 116.5 billion of revenue for fiscal 2025. And then scenario three assumes that Blackwell does not ship until calendar Q1 of fiscal 2025. And it also assumes that NVIDIA's data center business starts to plateau. And that's why we have low single-digit revenue growth, sequential revenue growth, which gets you to 112 billion for fiscal 2025. We didn't do a scenario four, but a scenario four would be literally flat to slightly down sequential revenue growth, which I guess theoretically could happen in the near term. I would think that it's more likely for calendar 2025, but it's possible that revenue growth flatlines or rolls over slightly ahead of Blackwell, which would get you to theoretically what, 108, 110 billion of revenue. So the differential between these three scenarios in terms of total revenue, the total revenue estimates for these three scenarios for fiscal 2025, not that much different than the 120 billion consensus estimate. But where NVIDIA is sort of priced for perfection, it doesn't take a lot to sort of break a stock. So that's why I thought it just makes sense to put this out there. That's all for now. See you next time.